My beloved child, stop for a moment and listen carefully. If you are hearing this message before tomorrow morning, do not rush past it. There is a reason these words found you now. You may think you simply clicked on another video. You may think this is just another message appearing on your screen. But there is something about the timing of this moment that you need to pay attention to. Because tomorrow morning, before the noise of the day begins, before your phone fills with notifications, before other people start demanding your attention, there is one simple thing you need to do. And I need you to understand this clearly. It is not complicated. It is not something that requires money. It is not something that requires you to become a different person overnight. It is not about proving that you are worthy. It is about obedience, a small act, a quiet decision, a moment that almost nobody else will see. But it can become deeply meaningful because of what it represents between you and God. You have been asking for direction. You have been asking for clarity. You have been wondering why certain things have taken so long, why doors opened and then suddenly closed, why certain people disappeared from your life, why the answer you wanted did not arrive when you expected it, why you have felt like something is changing, even though you cannot yet explain what that change is. And perhaps the hardest part has been the silence. You prayed, you waited, you tried to remain faithful. But there were moments when you wondered whether your prayers were actually being heard. There were nights when you carried questions into bed that nobody else knew about. There were mornings when you woke up with the same uncertainty you had the day before. And still, somehow, you kept going. That matters. Your willingness to keep going matters. Your decision not to completely give up matters. And tomorrow morning, God is asking you for one more step, not 10 steps. Not a perfect plan, one step. But before I tell you exactly what that step means, I want you to understand why tomorrow morning is important. Because this is not really about the clock. It is about what happens when you give God your first attention instead of giving the world your first attention. Think about your normal morning. You wake up, you reach for your phone, you check messages, you look at notifications, you think about responsibilities, you remember problems, you start calculating what needs to be done, and before you even get out of bed, your mind may already be carrying the weight of the entire day. But tomorrow, I want you to interrupt that pattern. Before anything else gets your attention, give God a moment, a real moment, not a rushed sentence, not words you say while your mind is somewhere else. Not something you do simply because you are afraid something bad will happen if you don't. Come to God honestly, sit quietly if you can, close your eyes, take a breath, and speak from your heart. Tell God what you have been afraid to say. Tell Him what you have been carrying. Tell Him what you don't understand. Tell Him where you need direction. Tell Him what you are waiting for. And if you don't know what to say, then don't force words. Silence can be honest too. Just sit there, be present, because sometimes you have been searching for a complicated answer when what your heart actually needs is a quiet place to hear clearly. And this is where the real assignment begins. The task is not simply to wake up early. The task is to put God before the noise. That is the difference. Tomorrow morning, before the world tells you what to worry about, allow God to remind you who you are. Before you start thinking about what you don't have, remember what you have already survived. Before you start worrying about tomorrow, give tomorrow back to God. Before you begin chasing answers, ask for wisdom. Before you make decisions out of fear, become still. Because you have been trying to carry things that were never meant to be carried entirely by yourself. And maybe that is why you have been feeling exhausted. Maybe your body is tired. But your mind is even more tired. You keep replaying conversations. You keep imagining possibilities. You keep wondering what will happen next. You keep asking yourself whether you made the right choice. You keep looking for signs that everything will eventually make sense. But tomorrow morning, you are being invited to do something different. Instead of searching everywhere for reassurance, become still long enough to receive peace. My beloved child, you do not need to have every answer before you take the next step. You only need enough trust to take the step you can see. And perhaps that is the lesson God has been teaching you through this entire season. You wanted the entire map, but you were given the next step. You wanted certainty, but you were given an opportunity to trust. You wanted the door to open immediately, but perhaps you were being prepared to recognize which door actually belongs to you. You wanted everything to change overnight, but God may have been changing you first. And tomorrow morning is connected to that process. This is why I don't want you to treat this message like entertainment. Listen carefully. The assignment is simple, but the meaning behind it is deeper than it first appears. Tomorrow morning, before you begin your normal routine, give God your first intentional moment. No performance, no pretending, no pressure, just honesty. If you have 5 minutes, give Him 5 minutes. If you have 10 minutes, give Him 10. If you can only sit quietly for a short while, then begin there. The point is not the number of minutes. The point is the priority. God is not impressed by how long you can perform a religious routine. What matters is the sincerity of your heart. And maybe you needed to hear that because you have been putting unnecessary pressure on yourself. You have been thinking that you have to say the perfect prayer. You have to feel something extraordinary. You have to experience some dramatic sign. You have to prove that your faith is strong enough. No. Come as you are. If you are tired, come tired. If you are confused, come confused. If you are disappointed, come disappointed. If you are hopeful, come hopeful. If you don't even know what you believe about tomorrow, bring that uncertainty too. You do not have to hide your heart from God. He already knows what is inside it. And perhaps that is what makes this moment so important. Because you have spent so much time trying to control what happens next. Tomorrow, release that need for control for a moment. Tell God, lead me where I need to go. Give me wisdom for what I cannot see. Help me recognize what I need to do and give me the courage to do it. Then become quiet. Don't immediately grab your phone. Don't immediately start looking for another answer. Don't immediately convince yourself that nothing happened because you didn't experience some dramatic feeling. Give the moment room. Sometimes clarity does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes as a quiet realization, a thought that suddenly becomes clear, a decision you have been avoiding that suddenly feels easier to face, a burden that feels slightly lighter, a sense that you don't need to keep fighting the same internal battle. A reminder of something you already knew but were afraid to acknowledge. That can be meaningful. And I want you to remember something else. Do not turn this message into a superstition. Tomorrow morning is not magical because of a particular hour. There is no secret formula that guarantees a miracle. The purpose is not to manipulate God into giving you what you want. The purpose is to draw near to Him with sincerity. That distinction matters. Because you may have been approaching God only when you desperately needed an answer. And God may be inviting you into something deeper, not simply asking Him to fix your circumstances, but allowing Him to shape the person who walks through those circumstances. That changes everything. Because sometimes the breakthrough you are asking for begins with the wisdom to recognize what needs to change inside you. Sometimes the door you are praying for requires you to stop knocking on the wrong door. Sometimes the person you are waiting for is not the answer. Sometimes the opportunity you are chasing is actually distracting you from the assignment that matters. And sometimes the greatest answer begins with peace. That is why tomorrow morning matters. Not because something supernatural must happen at a specific second, but because you are making a decision about what gets the first place in your day. And that decision can affect the way you see everything that follows. Imagine waking up tomorrow and, for once, not immediately allowing anxiety to speak first. Imagine not allowing fear to write the first sentence of your day. Imagine not allowing other people's expectations to determine how you feel before you even leave your room. Imagine beginning with stillness, with gratitude, with honesty, with prayer, with surrender. Then step into your day. You may still have problems. You may still have responsibilities. You may still receive disappointing news. You may still encounter people who test your patience. but you will not enter those moments from exactly the same place. You will have already reminded yourself that your entire life is not controlled by what happens during one difficult morning, and that is where your strength begins, not in pretending that everything is perfect, but in knowing where to turn when it isn't. If you have been feeling overwhelmed lately, let this be your reminder. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to admit that you don't know what comes next. Faith does not mean you never feel afraid. Faith means fear does not have to make every decision for you. And tomorrow morning, there may be a moment when your old routine tries to take over. You may wake up and immediately want to check your phone. You may remember everything that is stressing you. You may tell yourself that you don't have time. You may think, "I'll do it later." That is the moment I want you to remember this message, not because you need to be afraid, but because that small decision is the whole point. Will you pause? Will you become still? Will you give God your attention before giving the world your attention? That is your task, and it may sound small, but small decisions repeated with sincerity can change the direction of a life. Think about the things that have changed you the most. Often it wasn't one massive event. It was a decision, a conversation, a moment when you finally said no, a moment when you finally said yes, a morning when you decided to stop running from something, a night when you finally admitted the truth to yourself, a quiet prayer when nobody knew you were struggling. Those moments can become turning points, and tomorrow may become one of those moments for you. Not because I can promise you exactly what will happen afterward. I cannot. Nobody should promise you that. But I can tell you this. A sincere decision to seek God, listen, pray, and move with wisdom is never wasted. So tomorrow morning, don't wake up looking for a spectacular sign. Wake up looking for a sincere connection. Don't ask, "How can I force something to happen?" Ask, "What do I need to understand?" Don't ask, "How can I get everything I want?" Ask, "What is the next right step?" Or don't ask, "Why hasn't everything changed yet?" Ask, "What is God teaching me while I wait?" Those questions can change the way you walk through your season. And if this message is speaking to something you have been experiencing privately, you don't need to explain your entire story in the comments. Just write, "I'm ready to take the next step." Not as a magical phrase, not as a promise that everything will instantly change. Write it as a personal reminder to yourself, a reminder that tomorrow morning you will choose intention over distraction, faith over panic, prayer over rushing, and trust over trying to control everything. If you feel comfortable, tell me in the comments what you are asking God for right now. You don't have to share anything private. You can simply write one word: direction, peace, strength, healing, wisdom. Whatever describes what your heart needs. Someone reading your comment may realize they are not the only person going through a difficult season, and sometimes that simple reminder can mean more than you know. But stay with me, because there is another part of this assignment you need to understand. The morning itself is only the beginning. The real test comes after the prayer, because it is easy to feel inspired for a few minutes. It is harder to carry that peace into a difficult conversation. It is easy to say you trust God when everything feels hopeful. It is harder to trust Him when the answer still hasn't arrived. It is easy to say, "I surrender." It is harder to stop trying to control every outcome, and that is where tomorrow's assignment becomes deeper. God may not be asking you to do something dramatic. He may be asking you to respond differently, to stop chasing something that keeps draining you, to forgive someone without returning to the same unhealthy cycle, to make the decision you have been avoiding, to stop speaking against yourself, to finally rest, to begin something you have been afraid to begin, to release something you keep trying to hold together. You may already know what that thing is, and if you do, don't ignore that realization. But don't make an impulsive decision simply because you heard it in a video either. Pray, think, seek wisdom, use discernment, then take the next responsible step. Because obedience and wisdom belong together. My beloved child, you have been waiting for something to happen outside of you, but perhaps tomorrow morning begins with something happening within you. A shift, a surrender, a decision, a return, a quiet moment when you finally say, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I don't want to walk into it carrying everything alone. That is enough for tomorrow. You don't need to know the entire future. You only need to be present for the next step. So tonight, before you sleep, don't fill your mind with fear about what tomorrow might bring. Prepare your heart instead. Forgive yourself for what you cannot change. Release what you cannot control. Thank God for what you still have, and ask for wisdom for what comes next. Then sleep. And when morning comes, remember this message. Before the world gets your attention, give God yours, because the urgent task is not about doing something impressive. It is about making room for prayer, making room for wisdom, making room for peace, making room to hear what you have been too distracted to notice. And once you make that room, you may begin to recognize something that has been there longer than you realized. You were never as alone as you thought. You were never required to have every answer. And this season, no matter how confusing it has been, does not have to define the rest of your story. Tomorrow morning, take the step, then keep walking, one decision at a time, one prayer at a time, one day at a time, because sometimes the beginning of your next chapter does not arrive with a loud announcement. Sometimes it begins quietly, in the morning, when nobody is watching, with one simple decision to put God first.